Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for attending my talk. So I cannot see you, so if you want to ask question, I guess the best way is just to unmute your microphone and ask the question. My name is Marc Pelage. I'm working at INRIA, and I will present a joint work with a student from ENS, with Waïs Azizian. So we worked on characterizing the expressing power of invariant and equivariant graph neural networks. So the problem we address here is a machine learning problem where we are dealing with graphs, and since you are dealing with graphs, you need to deal with symmetry. So the first thing I want to tell you is why symmetries are important in machine learning. And I will start with the first question for you. So here I'm expecting an answer from the huge crowd following the talk. So if you start with a very simple example, which is a linear regression, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
No.
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 Okay. This was not the question. So your task is to estimate a linear model, which is the sum of the beta i's xi from noisy observations. So typically the vector x is input, and the y is what you need to predict. So the output given by your linear model, where you have this linear model and you put some, let's say, Gaussian noise. So this is a standard linear regression problem. And my first question is, if you make an additional assumption on your model, in addition to be linear, you know that this model is invariant to permutation of the input, meaning that you know that if you take the vector, you can permute all the entry of the vector until it should give you the same noisy answer. Then what is the number of parameters you need to estimate?
1.
Yes, I don't know who gave the answer. So, so there is only one parameter to estimate because the invariance principle here implies that all the betas are equal. There is only one linear model. There is 1 degree of freedom, sorry, for a linear model which is invariant to its input. So instead of n parameters, you only need to have 1 parameter to estimate. So you see that you can get much better algorithm in order to do estimation if you make, if you know that your model is invariant. So let's do something more related to graphs. So a second question is, if I'm doing a linear regression, but now on a graphs, so what does this mean in this very particular setting? This means you are trying to estimate a linear function, let's say, of the adjacency matrix of the graphs. So what it means if you deal with a graph is that this matrix will represent exactly the same graph if you take a random permutation of the row and columns. Because you will get exactly the same graph. It's just you are relabeling the nodes from 1 to n to sigma 1, sigma n, where sigma is your permutation. So this question is a bit more tricky. How many parameters do you still need to estimate? The naive guess is here you have n square coefficient. Or order n, I mean, yeah, or n square coefficient, a little bit less if your graph is symmetric, but let's say it's directed graphs. So if you are dealing with a graph, how do you reduce the number of parameters from n square to?
The automorphism of the graph?
Nope, it does not depend. To only 2 parameters. Here, this is the equation for the unique, the family of linear functions which are invariant to permutation of rows and columns. So you see, you can do basically only two operations, which are non-trivial, either summing over the diagonal or summing all the coefficients which are not on the diagonal. And that's it. If you are asking for a function to be linear and invariant to permutation of rows and columns, these are the only two legitimate functions you can do. And then you have only the coefficient alpha and beta to estimate. And one very nice thing here is that you see that if n is the number of nodes in your network, the number of parameters you need to estimate does not scale with the size of the graphs. So whatever the size of the graphs, you only have two parameters to estimate. In this case, as in the first case, you had only one parameter to estimate, whatever n was.
Mark?
Yes?
But you're assuming that you can permute columns and rows independently here? Because if you permute two rows, if it's a graph, you've got to permute the corresponding columns, no?
Yes, so this is what I'm assuming. This is what I'm calling invariant to permutation of the. So this is the same permutation for the row and the columns.
Okay.
Is that clear? Thank you for the question.
I have a question, Mark.
Yeah.
Does this apply to any possible graph, or this is for specific graphs where you allow these permutations to happen?
No, this is true for any possible graphs. And I mean, this is just a matter of definition. When you say that your input is a graph, when I will say that, what I will mean by that is that I don't care about the particular representation of the graph. So if you give me one representation of the graph, if you give me exactly the same graph but with permuted number for the nodes, I should get the same answer. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does. Would it work for weighted graphs as well?
Yes, here the adjacency matrix, you can put whatever you want.
Okay, thank you.
You can even put, I mean, you can take the Laplacian if you prefer, you can take, yeah.
There was a question about graph automorphisms, but I mean, relabeling is linked to automorphisms, isn't it?
Yes, but so this is automorphism is connected to sometimes you can relabel the graph and obtain exactly the same graph. This is what automorphism is doing. But here I don't care. Here I want to have a function which is linear for any graphs, whatever the graph is.
Okay, so here just you just look at the adjacency matrix and you want an invariance with respect to permutation of the adjacency matrix, but it's not enough to imply that this relabeling leads to a graph automorphism. That's what you say.
Yes, so what I'm saying is that here I'm representing a graph by its adjacency matrix.
Yes.
Now, if you take an automorphism of the graph, what it means is that the corresponding permutation will not change the adjacency matrix. You will get the same.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So here what I'm asking is basically the opposite. If I'm taking a permutation which is not in the automorphism group of the graph, I should still get the same answer because this is still the same graph.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Does it make sense?
Could you give an example of what we could learn with such a simple model in the graph?
What we could learn, I mean, this has nothing to do with learning here. This is just to say what I mean by what is a graph as an object. A graph as an object, I'm considering what people call unlabeled graphs. So there is no label on the nodes. And if you are giving me a graph with, so I will always consider a representation given by the adjacency matrix. And for me, if you are permuting the row and columns with the same permutation, this should correspond exactly to the same object. So if I'm making a prediction, if I'm computing something, I should get the same answer for both representation because the underlying object is the same.
Mhm.
If it's still unclear, I mean, I will go on, and if it's still unclear, please ask more questions. Is that okay?
Yes.
So here is what I'm calling graph isomorphism. So two graphs, the one on the left and the one on the right, are basically the same graphs, even though I do not have the same label on the nodes. And you can see that they are the same with the mapping of the nodes given on the right. If you map node A to node 1, node B to node 6, node C to node 8, and so on. So this is, you obtain a bijection from the set of vertices of the first graph to the set of vertices of the second graph, and you see that you are preserving edges. So for me, here I have two pictures which are quite different, but I want the answer of my algorithm to be the same for these two graphs, whatever pictures I'm taking. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, so this is here the idea, and the main reason why I want to do that is because, as shown in the first slide, in a learning scenario, so if you have a data set of graphs and you want to learn property of your graphs, you have much less parameter to learn if you know that you are dealing with graphs. So if you take care of this symmetry of the graphs. So the main goal of my presentation will be to design machine learning algorithms which are designed in order to deal with graphs, so able to deal with these symmetries.
Mark?
Yes?
Just before you enter the details, so in the previous slide, you introduced a function that was had the diagonal and also non-diagonal elements, and you're summing these up. So, but this is a function that starts from some graph that has a lot of information detailed. For example, Aij you can say that this edge and this edge and this edge exists. But then you simplify this information to one function. Another function that you could use, for example, is that f of A is equal to the number of edges. So
Yes.
there would be also a big family of.
But this will fit with alpha equals beta.
Yeah, exactly. So this is but the number of edges, for example, is an information that is much more. It's not sufficient to distinguish between graphs. That's what
Yes.
I'm saying. You're losing a lot of information on distinguishability.
Yes, I agree. So this is why I don't want to restrict myself to linear functions.
Okay. I see where you're going. Okay, thanks.
So if you restrict yourself to linear function, as you say, your expressive power is very low. So what I want to get is an expressive power which is much higher by dealing with a non-linear function of the graphs.
Okay. Thank you very much.
But still, my function will be invariant or equivariant. So here are the notation for those who like a bit more formal definition. So as I said, I will always consider graphs as tensor. So a graph is given by its adjacency matrix. So this is what I'm calling a tensor of order 2. You will see that sometimes it's useful to use tensor of higher order. So what does it mean to have a tensor of order k? This means that you are looking at k tuples of nodes of the graphs. So when k equals 2, you are looking at each pair of nodes in the graph, and you are telling me whether you are putting basically a 1 or a 0 if there is an edge or not between these two nodes. Now you can represent the same graphs by looking at triples of vector, and you will tell me if there is an edge between the first and the second, an edge between the, and so on. So we'll go back to this a bit later. So if the order k is higher, this means that you are looking at k tuples of nodes instead of just pair of nodes. So then I'm defining basically an action of the symmetric group on these tensors. And you see that here two graphs are isomorphic, sorry, if and only if the first graph is obtained by from the second one by applying any permutation sigma. So this is just the definition of sigma acting of G is just you are permuting the indices of the nodes. So now you have two notions which are important. If you take a function taking a tensor and producing a real number, then this function is said to be invariant if you give two isomorphic graph or isomorphic tensor, you get the same result, the same real number. And it is equivariant if when you are applying the permutation inside in the input, you will apply the same permutation on the output of the function f. Okay, so a very simple example of invariant function. If you it's any symmetric function of the input. If you are dealing with tensor of order 1, so invariant function are extension of symmetric function to higher order tensor, if you want. So here you see that in the definition of the sigma, I am applying the same sigma on the columns and on the rows. And a notion of equivariance in a graph setting, this will be like you are computing a real number for each node of the graph based on the whole graph. So if now you are permuting the input of the graph, you want that the vector you obtain should be permuted with the same permutation. So it means that the value of f is sitting on each vertex. It's attached to a vertex. It's a mark, if you want.
For example, Mark, we can take the degrees, I guess, in the graph.
Yes. So if the function which take as input the adjacency matrix and produce the degree, it's an equivariant, a simple case of an equivariant function.
Or the set of neighbors.
What do you mean by a set of neighbors?
You take a node and you look at set of neighbors.
Ah, yes, you can do that. Yes. Okay, so here is what the people doing graph neural networks realized that they wanted their network to be invariant or equivariant for the reason I discussed before. And here is a very simple, what we call message passing graph neural network, which is equivariant in this case. So the input is a graph with vertices and edges with n nodes, and you are taking features on the node, denoted by each node here. So you can think of the field f of features as real number if you want. And now you are computing a new feature on each node according to this equation. So L is for, so this is an iterative message passing algorithm if you want, and L would correspond to what people call a layer in graph neural network. So in order to compute the value of the features sitting at node I at the L plus 1 layer, you apply a function f of your previous value sitting at I on the multiset, so exactly as François said, the multiset of all the previous value at neighbor of I. So this notation is for multiset. So this means there is no ordering in this manner. So typically, they take a function f, which is parameterized with a weight, and then what they try to do is to learn the best possible weight of this function f for their given task. Okay, so f is for us it will be a continuous function. So the one thing we show actually in the paper is that there is, you see, I wrote two types of message passing equation. The first one with the function f, and the second one with the function f0 and f1. So it should be clear that any function f can be written with this f0 and f1. So why is that? Because here I'm taking a sum over all the neighbors of I of a given function of the pair of features sitting at node I and node G. So this is clearly a function of the multiset, like this. So it will be equivalent. I mean, even if you fix I, this is completely symmetric in G, the neighbor. What is perhaps surprising is that you can write any f function like this in this form of f0 and f1. So you can always write this function of the multiset as a sum over this this set. Does it make sense?
Is it equivalent to this notion of universal mark on point processes? I mean, universal mark would look at the whole neighborhood. Here you look only at neighbors, so it's not probably more restricted. But
yes,
I mean,
it's more restricted. I think it's much easier actually. It's
yeah, it's a very local thing based on neighbors. Yeah. It is the sort of the most general local mark based on neighborhood of size 1, right? Okay.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
That's you can say it.
Yes. Yeah. And if I get it correctly, the completely general case, which would be a deterministic function, measurable function of the universal mark, the equivalent would be to look at the tensor of size, the diameter of the graph, something like that.
Yes.
That's the ultimate mark.
Yes. So here we are starting from the very local thing. We are building features on nodes. So these are tensor of order 0 if you want, or order 1.
Yes. Okay.
And yeah, tensor of here we are dealing with tensor of order 1 basically.
Okay. Thanks.
But what you can easily, I mean, I guess it's clear from the definition is that this message passing layer is equivariant. So if you are permuting the input of the graph, you will permute the feature sitting at the node. And what we show in the paper is that both expressions above are equivalent. So it's from a learning perspective, if you want to learn this f function, it's exactly the same as learning this f0 and f1 function. And typically, it's much easier to deal with this f0 and f1 function with a sum instead of dealing with a parameterizing function in terms of multiset. So this is more, I mean, a convenient way of encoding the information on the left. So then the question is, what can be learned with such message passing GNN? So we call this MGNN because we will see other kind of graph neural networks afterwards. So in order to answer this question, there is a paper from Xu et al. Who compares the power of this message passing GNN with the so-called Weisfeiler-Lehmann test, which is an algorithm designed in theoretical computer science in order to deal with the graph isomorphism problem. So here, this is a picture showing you how the so-called 2WL algorithm is working. So you start on the left by putting a color on all, which is the number 1 on all the nodes. Okay, so this is the picture on the left part, top left part of my figure. Then you go downwards, and what each node is doing, it's collecting the set of color of its neighbor. So for example, the top neighbor has its own color, which is 1, and only one neighbor with color 1. The one on the top left node has its own color, which is a 1, and 2 neighbors with a 1. So this is why you have a 1, 1. And the one on the bottom right has its own color, which is 1, and 3 neighbors which are 1. So this is why you have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Then the second step is, from this label, you map them to the natural number with, by, usually I guess here it's a lexicographic order. Okay, so this label, the 1.1, 1,1 will become a new 1. The 1,11 will become a 2. And the 1,1111 will become a 3. So, very easy question. What do you get here as a feature sitting on the nodes?
The degree?
Yes, exactly. This is the degree. Okay, the degree is an equivalent function. And then you go on this way. So now the only node with degree 1, it has a color, its own color, which is 1, and one neighbor which has a color which is 2. The only node with color with degree 3 has its own color, which is 3, and 3 neighbor of color 2. So you obtain the picture on the right bottom, and again you use lexicographic order in order to get a natural number. And you go on like this. Okay, so this algorithm is used. So you see that the set of colors at each time, the set of colors we are obtaining on the nodes is equivariant. It does not depend on the way you are labeling your graph. The first one is the degree, and so on. And so how it is used to deal with the graphism-morphism problem. If the graphism-morphism problem is the question, given 2 graphs, can you find a permutation going from one to the other? Are they isomorphic? So you can run this algorithm. And for sure, if at some on both graphs, and for sure, if the algorithm produces different colors for graph 1 and graph 2, you know that they will not be isomorphic. Then, if the sequence of color produced is always the same, when you are running the Weisweiler-Lehmann test on graph 1 and Weisweiler-Lehmann test on graph 2, then you will predict that they are isomorphic, even so they might not be isomorphic. So there is one particular case where this simple algorithm failed. This is for deregular graphs. So as you have seen here, the first step of your Weisweiler-Lehmann test is to produce the degree of the nodes. So if you have a deregular graph, this means that everybody will have the same color D. And then for the next step, everybody has degree D with all the neighbors having color D. So you already, everybody will have always the same color. So any 2 deregular graphs will be seen as isomorphic by this Weisweiler-Lehmann test, even though they might not be. Okay? So in this paper, what they show is that message passing GNN, so function obtained with this general function, will have exactly the same power of separation as this algorithm, meaning that if the WL test is able to distinguish 2 graphs, then you can find a message passing GNN which will give different results for these 2 graphs. And if the WL test fails on 2 graphs, then you know that it's impossible to find a message passing GNN which will be able to distinguish these two graphs. So the result for you MGNN, whatever the function f here or f naught and f1 here, will always be the same for these two graphs. So there is no way you can distinguish them. So this is why here, a consequence of this result is that message passing GNN are useless on the regular graphs, because we know that WL is useless on the regular graphs. So here I denoted there is a parameter in my Weisweiler-Lehmann test, and the picture I show you corresponds to the case k equal 2. But indeed, there is a hierarchy of Weisweiler-Lehmann test with increasing power with this parameter k. So here you see that you are aggregating the information of your neighbor. When you are basically, when k equals 2, you are dealing with tensor of order 1. With k equals 3, you will deal with tensor of order 2. So instead of coloring nodes, you will color edges, and then you will look at paths of length 2 in your graphs. So I will come back to that a bit later. The only thing you need to remember is that there is a whole family of tests, and they get more and more powerful as k increase. And k is a natural number.
So Mark, is
Yes.
this linked to the reconstruction of the universal mark, in a sense? As you increase k, I mean, you get the universal mark, or the equivalent of the universal mark for graphs, and therefore you end up by really the ultimate mark.
I guess you can say it like that. The thing is here, okay, I'm always dealing with finite graphs. So as soon as k is equal to n, you are done.
Yes, with the diameter, or even less than that. Okay, yes.
Yeah, less
Yes,
than.
I understand. Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So I mean, in order to get better graphs, people looked at linear graph layer. I mean, this is very natural layer. This is, you are trying to do the same thing as what people did with multi-layer perceptron, for example, where you are using linear layers and non-linear function, activation function. So here we are doing the same thing. But as you mentioned, if you are dealing with linear layers and you restrict yourself to the adjacency matrix, you have only 2 degrees of freedom. So clearly you will not be very expressive. So what people did is consider linear layer of higher order tensor. So meaning that here, instead of considering only the adjacency matrix, if you want, you can consider the k tuples of your network. So here is one example where of what we call a k-linear graph neural network. So the first thing you need to do is you need to map your adjacency matrix to a higher order tensor. So here is one example of what you can, what you will do for k equals 3. So each time you consider a triple of nodes, you can be in one of these 4 situations. Either the 3 nodes are disconnected in the graph, or 2 of them are connected by only one segment, or the 3 of them are connected but a pair of them is not connected, or it's a triangle. So the first thing you will do is you will take a number encoding whether you are in this situation, this situation, this situation, and this one for all triples in your graphs. So you see that you have much more information here. For example, than just looking at the adjacency matrix. So now, for example, it's very easy to count the number of triangles in your graphs. If you consider just this tensor of order 3. Once you have a high order tensor, you apply linear map. But since you duplicate a lot the information in your higher order tensor, you will be much more expressive. And then there is a last layer where you need to reduce basically the dimension. So you need to go from a tensor of order k, so encoding things like that, to either, let's say, a real number if you are doing a regression, or a label, or a real number sitting on the node. So this is done by this invariant and equivariant reduction layer. So the first one is just taking the sum of all the features in your graph, and the second one is just taking the sum except for the first number corresponding to the node I, for which you want to compute the feature. Does it make sense? So when k is equal to 2, this lifting is kind of trivial. This is just the identity map. You put a 0 if there is no edge and a 1 if there is an edge. But for higher k, you see that this is the map you want to use. So now here is what you can do with such linear graph neural network. They are shown to be at least as powerful as KWL. So for example, one corollary of this is that if you consider tensor of order 3, you will be more powerful than message passing graph neural network, in the sense that you can express more property of your graph than by using a message passing graph neural network. So here is one very simple example. So the graph on the left with the two disconnected triangles, and so you have on the one the cycle on the right. You cannot distinguish them with the 2WL test, the meaning that message passing graph neural network will not be able to distinguish these two graphs. Whereas, of course, when you are going to tensor of order 3, you will immediately see that here there are triangles, where here there are no triangles, so you will be able to distinguish them. So what it means in terms of learning, that there is no message passing graph neural network able to distinguish these two graphs, whereas for sure, thanks to this result, there is a 3 linear graph neural network able to distinguish these two graphs. Does it make sense?
Mark, perhaps I have a question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you would only take linear functional, if I got it correctly.
Yes.
And so this is the same in the earlier construction that you compare your method to?
No. Here there is no, I mean, you are not using linear function, but the constraint is you are using only a very local function. So,
okay. And so if you would take, so the equivalent, the nonlinear function of these tensors of higher order have more capacity of expression than linear functional. So my question is, what type of constraint does this linear assumption entail? Or as a way of asking it, why do you make this assumption of linearity, and do you lose something there?
Yes, you are. I mean, you are losing a lot, because what we saw before is that if you just count what are the degree of freedom for linear, let's say, equivariant function transforming a tensor of order k to a tensor of order k, it's a fixed number. Actually, it's a Bell number of k plus k, and it does not depend on n. So whatever the size of your graph, this is you have a fixed number of parameters that you can learn. Does it make sense? So here the only way you increase the power is by lifting the graph into a higher order tensor, because here you see that in your tensor you have much more information than, I mean, this is from an information theoretic point of view, this is exactly the same information as the adjacency matrix. But if then you are adding a constraint that you want to apply only linear layers, it's much. I mean, you get redundant information here that you can use with your linear layer. So the reason why people looked at linear layers is because I mean, you have to start somewhere. On linear layer, it's the easiest layer you can think of.
Okay, thank you.
So, so here is then comes the question: does your algorithm, if you have an algorithm like message passing GNN or linear graph neural network, will it generalize? So if you are training your f function on a data set, will it give a sensible answer on the test set? So with the results so far that we have seen so far, it's clear that message passing GNN will not be able to count the number of triangles. This example is clear. And with linear graph neural networks, well, it's not clear, because the only thing that is unsure here is that for any pair of graphs, you will be able to find three linear GNN, which will tell if the two graphs have the same number of triangles or not. But now there is no guarantee at all that this particular graph neural network will perform well on unseen graphs. So on the test set, there is no guarantee at all. So in order to deal with this issue, people looked at approximation results. So here the question is, can you approximate, for example, the function counting the number of triangles with only one message passing linear graph neural network? So far there are no results on this. The only results which are known dealing with approximation deal with k linear GNN when k tends to infinity, and then people looked at showed that this architecture can actually approximate any invariant or equivariant function of the graph. But for this result to be true, you need the order of the tensor to tend to infinity. And remember that, I mean, from a practical perspective, you need to look at all the n to the k tuples. So when k tends to infinity, you get into trouble. So what we look with Wallis is the problem of approximation when k is fixed. So in order to present your results, you need to understand two different concepts. The first one is the notion of separation, and it's written here. It's quite simple, but given by this picture, but I mean, the formalism is a bit heavy. So here you have a set of function f. They are all defined on the same input set x, and you define an equivalence relation on this x by saying that x and x prime belong to the same class if all the function in this fcal will give the same value for f of x and f of x prime. So the meaning of this is that x and x prime, you cannot separate them with any function of fcal. So for example, the picture here on the left, you have the set 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the graphs which are in the 1 will get the same value with your function. All the graphs in the set 2 will get the same value. And you see that this is another set of functions, and you see that this one is less separating than this one, because you cannot distinguish anymore graphs in the set 1 and in the set 2, and so on. So two sets of functions, f and e. F is said to be more separating, is basically the partition of f is thinner than the partition of e, which is depicted here. Is that clear? There is some noise here in my apartment. I hope you can still hear me. So if we translate our results seen so far with this notion of separation, what we have is a bunch of algorithms called KWL, which are better and better at separating points when K increase. So this is written like this. When this partition is included in this one, this means that this partition is thinner, so you can separate more points. Then people prove that the separating power of message passing GNN is the same as the separating power of 2WL. And the the separating power, of K linear graph neural network is better than the separating power of KWL. So in particular, for K equals 3, you see that if you put everything together, this one will be better than the message passing GNN. So the second notion we need to deal with is the notion of approximation. And for approximation, we use a very basic standard notion of approximation. We looked at the set of continuous invariant or equivalent function from x to y, where x and y are basically a subset of RD. And a closure of a set of function in this set of invariant continuous function or equivalent continuous function is denoted by this f bar over there. And this is what we call by the function we can approximate. This is this set, the closure with respect to the uniform norm. So we are dealing with always with x, which is compact. So you don't care whether you are using this norm or another norm. Everything is kind of equivalent here. So clearly, if you have 2 points and no function can distinguish them, 2 separate points, then this set of function cannot be dense in the set of continuous function. So if if you think of a real valued function, for example, starting from 0, 1 to R, if you have 2 points in 0, 1 and all your function in your set have the same value each time for these 2 points, then clearly you will not be able to approximate any continuous function, because you will only be able to approximate the continuous function which are equal at these 2 points. So approximation implies separation. And there is a very nice math theorem, which is called the Stone-Weierstrass theorem, which gives you condition for equivalence between separation of approximation. And namely, the condition is that F is an algebra, so basically it's a vector space where you are allowed to do pointwise multiplication. So this is usually, you probably seen this theorem applied to polynomials. So when you are dealing with, you forget about the symmetries here for a moment, a continuous function from the real to the real. You know that the polynomial function is dense in this continuous set, and it turns out that polynomial is a superalgebra and can separate any 2 points. So this is the Weierstrass theorem, and Stone proves that actually being an algebra and being able to separate implies approximation. So we'd like to apply such a theorem in our setting, but for sure we know that we are dealing with algorithm with a limited expressive power, in the sense that they will not be able to separate all graphs. So we need to relax the separation assumption. So here is an easy inclusion. So what it tells you is that all the functions that you can approximate with your set of functions, so here it will be either the set of message passing GNN or linear GNN, they must belong to this set here. So they must be continuous function from X to, let's say, R. And what is the meaning of this is that they cannot be more powerful than any function if you're in your set of function. So I mean, this is the easy part. If you have a set of function and none of your function is able to distinguish between two graphs, then in the closure of your function, you will not be able to distinguish these two graphs either. This is what is written here. Now, what we like is to get the opposite inclusion here. So it turns out that there is a Stone-Weierstrass theorem dealing with this. Again, if f is a subalgebra containing the constant function, actually it should contain the constant function here also in the Stone-Weierstrass theorem, then you have equality between these two sets. So all the functions you can approximate are exactly those with a separating power which is less than the family. Does it make sense? No answers, or I guess it does. I'm running a little bit late. So I will perhaps skip a bit the technical part, which is here. What I wanted to say is that this theorem is true for real valued function. It turns out that if you want to extend this to a vector valued function, this has been done, but it's not so easy. It has been done by Tim Hort, so the same guy. And what we want to do here is to add symmetries. So what we did with Boris is we extended the Tim Hort result to a Stone-Weierstrass theorem for vector valued function with symmetries, with generic model by this any finite group here, this G. And you obtain a result which is similar to the one I just showed you in the simple real case, but with an additional assumption here that I will not discuss further. Probably. So this is the result for the invariant case, but we have a similar result for the equivalent version in the paper. So if we apply our result to graph neural network, so this is what we know so far, and this is a consequence of our general Stone-Weierstrass kind of theorem. So the set on the left here are all the functions that can be approximated by the architecture I described to you before. And you have an explicit formula on the right. I wrote what is this set of functions. So for example, you see that message passing GNN can approximate exactly the same function as two linear graph neural network. So dealing with tensor of order 2, so only with matrices adjacency matrix. And if you increase the order of your tensor, the k here, you see that you will get better and better approximation result. So by the way, if you let k tends to infinity, you recover the universality result that I told you before. Here, if we come back to the problem of is it possible to count the number of triangles with graph neural networks, you have the answer here. When you take k equals 3, you know that it's possible with 3WL. So you know that there is at least one 3-linear graph neural network which will be able to count the number of triangles on any graphs. So this is what we call generalization. So what I want to discuss, if I have a bit more time, is how to do the same thing with only order 2 tensors. So here you see that you need order 3 tensor in order to be able to count triangles. So of course, if I'm asking the question, this is because I have a positive answer to it. And this is what we call folklore graph neural network. So why did we call it like this? It's because there is a so-called folklore version of the Weisfeiler-Lehmann test of order k. And if you translate this in terms of neural network, this is the new layer that you have. So you start from the adjacency matrix. So you want to keep things simple. So you want to deal only with adjacency matrix. So this is why you see here I have only tensor of order 2 everywhere. So what I'm doing, I'm taking the original tensor of order 2. I'm passing it through M1, M2, M3, which are, let's say, continuous function. This will be modeled by MLPs here. Producing new feature on edges. Okay, so here you take feature on each edges, and you are passing the M1, M2, M3 as your just continuous function apply on each edge. So you have a feature of size A sitting on each edge. You produce a new feature with this M1, M2, M3 on each edge. Now the trick here is to do a multiplication here. So you see that you take these two features and you do matrix multiplication at this point. And then you concatenate with the feature sitting on each edge, and you obtain a new representation of your graph with new features. So you see that it's not anymore linear, because here I'm allowing a multiplication. And it turns out that you can extend this multiplication, which is only valid for tensor of order 2, to any order k if you want. And this is done in our paper. So now the folklore graph layer can be written this way, where you have f0, f1, and f2, 3 different functions. And I mean, here perhaps it's not clear, but this is just the product of these two vectors, component-wise. And it's clear from this definition here that this layer is equivariant, meaning that if you permute all the nodes of your graph, you will permute the output of your graph. So here, the nice thing is, in input, you take a tensor of order 2, so you can think of an adjacency matrix, and the output is still a tensor of order 2. So this is a new adjacency matrix, but with, if you want, new weight sitting on edges. And now what we call the folklore GNN is just the composition of this folklore graph layer with a final invariant or equivariant reduction layer as before. And what we show in the paper is that the separating power of this folklore GNN is the same as the 2 folklore WL, which is the 3 WL test. So you are gaining a factor 1 in the K, and then if you apply all approximation result, you obtain that you can, all the functions you can approximate are all the functions that can be approximated by the 3WL test. So this is so far the best architecture in terms of approximation that you can get with order 2 tensor. So the last part, and I will be done, does it work in practice? So the theory is telling you that this folklore graph neural network has a better power of approximation and separation among all architecture working with tensor of order 2. So I will not present the result done on the invariant version, so, but Marron et al. Get state-of-the-art result for problem of graph classification and graph regression. So here the task is given one graph, you need to predict whether, for example, the graph is a molecule, and you need to predict whether the molecule will be active or inactive for a given disease. But there were no results about the equivariant folklore graph GNN. So this is what we did with Weiss on this quadratic assignment problem. So the quadratic assignment problem can be seen as a noisy version of the graph isomorphism problem. So if you look at two graphs, what you are trying to do is to find the permutation that will map one graph to the other with minimal number with covering edges. So you look at the difference between the two adjacency matrices, and you want this difference to be small, meaning that the number of edges which are present in one and not in the other is small. So this is a hard problem. And we looked at it on a synthetic data set. So for this, you take one graph, and then you applied some noise on this. So this N matrix. So what you do is for each edge in the graph, you will remove it or keep it with a given probability. And for each non-edge in the graph, you will add an edge with a given probability also. Okay, so P here, the parameter P is basically the level of noise that you have that you are adding in your graph. Now, given the original G on this noisy version of the graph, you want to align the two graphs in order to say which vertex corresponds to which vertex in these two graphs. So in order to learn a graph neural network to do that, we use what is called a Siamese architecture. So you take one graph, you put this as an input to your graph neural network. It will produce a vector which is equivariant. So it will produce feature on each node. You apply the same network as here on the noisy version. It will produce features on nodes again. And now, in order to map nodes from here to here, you look at the inner product of this E1 and E2. So if the embedding of the nodes are close together, you want these two nodes to be matched, and otherwise you say they do not correspond to each other. So we did this on two distribution of graph, Erdős-Rényi and Deregular. And of course, deregular graphs are much harder to deal with. And here are the empirical results. So in red, this is what we have done with O'Rourke. Each time, the accuracy is the fraction of nodes that are correctly mapped between the two graphs, because you know the ground truth. And the X axis here is the level of noise, so this parameter P. And we dealt with relatively small graphs, size 50, density 0.2. So this means you have probably an average degree of 10. So relatively sparse graphs. And you see that, for example, on regular graph model, so SDP is doing very poorly. A spectral method called low rank is doing relatively poorly also. But both methods here are, I mean, they are not learning algorithms, they are fixed algorithms, and we just apply them to the dataset. And then there is this message passing GNN, which is relatively poor on the regular model. On the O model using the matrix multiplication is the red one, which is doing a very good job, even for very high noise, because here the level of the noise is the same as the density of the adjacency matrix. I guess I have no more time. So here is the conclusion. So what we show is basically that separation is equivalent to approximation for what we call practical GNN, meaning dealing with fixed order tensor. We propose folklore GNN, which are shown theoretically to be the best architecture so far dealing with order 2 tensor. And they show a very good average performance on the quadratic assignment problem. There are much more results in the paper. We are dealing both with invariant and equivariant cases, with higher order of FGNN, dealing with graphs of varying size, applying our result to a point net architecture, which is a simpler architecture dealing with set instead of graphs. And on the practical side, we also implemented max tensor in PyTorch to be able to deal with batches of graph of varying size. And you can find the GitHub here. So thank you all.